Hello everybody and welcome to another watercolor tutorial. We're going to be drawing and then painting this raspberry. So I'm first going to show you how to draw the raspberry in a simple way, and this is just going to help us paint the raspberry so that it looks as realistic as possible. So the way that I drew this guy is basically just I always say painting, drawing a circular shape. It could be kind of in between an oval and a circle, but more circular. And then about, I don't know, the top fourth, that is where we want to start our, I don't know what this part of the raspberry is called, but those little leaves that come off with the stem. In that top fourth, that's where we're going to start drawing them. So I'm going to have 5 leaves for mine, and I'm going to have my bottom leaves that kind of look like this. I'm going to have another one that's overlapping. That's also kind of swooping down like that. Another one like this. One that branches out a little bit further, like that, and then one that kind of swoops outwards, and then we're going to have our little stem as well. And then for the actual, berry, the little ovals, or not ovals, oh my goodness, spheres, the little spheres that make up all the little berries of the raspberry. The way that I kind of figured it out for myself is you want to have 7 circles on each side, or around 7 that meet in the bottom. So the top ones are going to be a little bit larger. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe like an 8th one. It doesn't have to be exactly 7, but that's just a rough guide. And I make the circles towards the bottom a little bit smaller because the raspberry is not going to be, like if this is my raspberry, this eraser, then it's not flat on a surface like this. We're kind of looking at it at this angle. So not flat, but kind of like that. So naturally, the berries that are at the bottom are going to look a little bit smaller because they're further away from the viewer. And then you can just fill in the rest of the raspberry with the circles. And I'm just doing it very roughly because I want it to look natural. And you can just erase away any that are overlapping on the leaves or whatnot. And there we have our raspberry. So I erased them just so that it's light enough for me to see, but so it's not dark enough that it shows through the watercolor. I'm going to be using my size 1 Winsor & Newton brush. You're going to grab sort of a red maroon mix. If you only have red, that's completely fine. I'm just used to raspberries that look a little bit more maroony than bright red. My mom has a lot of raspberries in her garden, so I'm just going off of that reference. But essentially what we're going to be doing here is painting those circles. And I'm gonna make it look like the sun is coming from the right side. And so, actually no, it's gonna be coming from the left side. So I'm gonna have the shadows on the right side of each little sphere. So I'm going to just paint the right half of the circle. And I'm just picking random circles to start with. And I'm gonna switch to, I'm gonna have two brushes on the go so that I don't have to continually rinse out one of my brushes. And we're just dragging out that watercolor to create a circle. And you're more than welcome to rinse your paintbrush in between to make sure that the left side of each circle is a much lighter color. And you're welcome to add a little bit more pigment on that right side if you find that it dried a little bit too pink. And I mean, mine are completely dry. So I can either re-wet the whole thing so that it creates a nice gradient, or I can just leave it the way it is. I might do a bit of both. And these gaps that you see in between the circles, it's okay that there are gaps, that's not a problem. Try to minimize them as much as you can. So if that means just making your circles a little bit bigger so that they're closer to one another, that's totally fine. We are going to be going over those spots, those gaps rather, but you obviously don't want too much of those gaps, because you'll see what I mean when we get to that step. But my point is just try to minimize those gaps as much as possible. So here, for example, I'm gonna make this circle quite a bit closer to these guys. And you can see like some of the circles I'm just painting full circles, which is completely okay. You probably want to do that on the right side because that's where we're going to have the least amount of sun, quote unquote, since it's coming from over here. But as long as you keep, you know, some of your berries with a gradient, it will look nice. So yeah, these ones I'm going to make a lot more solid. And I'm just leaving that top layer unpainted because I want to paint the green parts of my raspberry first. I just wanted to get in some rough ideas of how my berries are going to be positioned in my raspberry. Okay, so before I fill in this last row of berries up top here, I'm just gonna go ahead and do the little leaves on top. I'm just debating what order I should do them in. I think I'll do the bottom leaves first. And this is because I want the other ones to overlap them. Finally, the little stem coming from it. Okay, so now that we have our, whoops, I just painted on my raspberry, but that's okay, we can fix that. We can quickly go over that. we go. We kind of fixed that a little bit. So yes, now that we have our greenery, we can finish the raspberry by adding that top layer. And obviously we're not going to paint the raspberries over the leaves. We want it to look like the opposite. So just be mindful of that as you're painting those remaining guys. So for example, this one, I have to be a little extra careful. And because it's at the top, I am going to paint it a little bit lighter. Okay, so now what we're going to do is mix some of our red, or the original color that we used for the raspberry, mix some of that with black so that you have this really dark maroon color. And what we're going to do here is fill in all those little individual white gaps with this darker pigment. And that's why we wanted to have those gaps as small as possible so that they're not overly, you know, sticking out quite a bit. So and they don't have to be super precise. It's not like you have to get rid of every single white spot that there is. That isn't the intention here. It's just to give our red berries a little bit more definition. Okay, so now that we've filled in all those white gaps with that darker color, you can just finish off your raspberry with some final details. So what I'm doing here is going over my darker berries and just adding some accents to them. So some of them I'm painting fully, some of them I'm leaving a little highlighted circle portion. As long as you're following the same general layout that you painted your dots in, so like these ones will obviously be lighter, these ones will be darker because they're further away from the light source. As long as you follow that, you should be fine. And you can even lighten or water down your pigment as you go on top of the really light berries. And if you have some white acrylic paint, you can even add some little white accents on some of your berries as well. And that's basically it. I hope you guys enjoyed this raspberry watercolor tutorial. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next episode.